Latinos make history every day. Okay.
Happy Friday, everybody. It is a big day here at 91.3 FM WVNY. How is everybody today? We are so excited to have our guests with us. We are here on the radio at SUNY Buffalo State University, and I'm so excited to be talking with someone who I feel like is a huge role model to me, and I'm actually going to give her the floor so she can introduce herself.
Hi, Talia. Thank you so much for having me. I am so honored to be here. My name is Rita, and I'm the founder of Latina Podcasters, a global podcast network that hosts podcasts from Latinas, Latinos, and the Latinx community based out of the U.S. for the world.
Wonderful.
I am so impressed with you just with that introduction. It's incredible, everything that you do. When I was preparing for the interview, I was like thinking about all these questions to ask you about Latinos as consumers, the space of Latinos like in the digital economy and all that. So, but I think I want to first ask you, like, if you could say a little bit about your journey and like how you got to the C-suite in a huge media platform. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. I started curious from the beginning. So I had my own podcast and I started it back in 2019 and quickly realized that there was a lack of diversity in the media space, specifically within this medium. And I decided to make a little bit of a change by creating a community to connect to other podcasters. So Latina Podcasters originally started as just like a community platform to interact and engage with other podcasters that were podcasting in the space. So I quickly decided that it was extremely important for us to not only be able to connect and share helpful tips, but really be able to see what this monetization landscape was going to look like. And that was one of the main questions that most people were asking is like, how do we monetize our podcast? And one of the things that I knew, and it wasn't necessarily that was being actually promoted at the time, because when I first started the network, there were no Latino listener reports. Like Edison wasn't doing the research at that point. So anybody who was doing anything related to Latino content in the podcasting space had to do some enormous amount of research. And luckily, we now have all this information.
Yeah, you're guessing one of my questions, which is, Rita, where do we find data? And I had some sources I want to talk with you about. But can you say, I feel like when I Googled you, you attended, was it University of New Orleans? Where did you attend, and then what did you study? Because I think depending on who you are, you approach the idea about monetizing your personal expression differently. And I wish like I would have had more of a business mind when I went into it. So Rita, what did you study, and like how did your academic or professional lens inform the way that you looked at the opportunity and the opportunities that you've provided for, I would say, thousands of women and families, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually, I graduated from the University of New Orleans with a degree in interdisciplinary studies. I was a career student. So for all the people who are listening who are feeling as though they might be confused about their track, if you live life backwards, then you would know why all of these things are happening, and just know that they're blessings in disguise. We can't always determine how life's going to turn out for us, even if we are on this track. You have people who go to med school and end up quitting and becoming, holistic life coaches. There you have people who are lawyers who leave and go start a nonprofit organization. So just because you have a degree in a specific area doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make you successful in any area that you go into. It's more or less continuing to follow the passion and allowing your life to kind of unfold for you. So for me, I was a business and urban planning major with ideas. So basically, I rounded out all of the information that I wanted to get and created this degree for myself that catered to me. And it's very interesting because in business, that's also what you're doing, right? Like you're finding a problem and you're catering to that specific problem versus going a traditional path and going to work for someone. And so for me, what was great is I had the opportunity to just be very expansive and creative with my mindset. It wasn't just specifically one type of career. I was in lobbying, and then I went over to healthcare. I was I was in medical sales for a few years before this even happened. And so none of those specific skill sets would have lended itself to podcasting in particular. However, as an entrepreneur, everything that I learned in general has been something that I've picked up. So sales skills, with lobbying, learning to read contracts, learning to write contracts before the lawyer actually writes them too, like learning what the jargon is and how important that is, and making sure that I'm always protecting the best interest of the business first. All of these things were things that I picked up along the way, and I learned as I was building as well. However, all of those skills translate over to being an entrepreneur because all of them were extremely important.
I'm just so impressed with the level of expertise you bring to leveraging Latina voices, which I think, as you know, I'm just a huge dork. Willie knows this. He hears me quote history all the time on our show, right? And I think about just our accessibility to media and technology, and kind of how that's evolved and how that's driving our consumer demand. Because I would say, when I was growing up, not every Latina that I knew had some type of device, or not every Latina I knew had a radio, but now we have opened up an entire consumer pool around Latinas in tech. And I think for me is someone who, I always joke, I say, I remember when Bobby brought the internet home. I remember when he brought the first computer home, and we were so excited, right? To just be part of the movement, because I knew that the internet was coming. And we were working class people, so it was always seen to be a privilege. But I think that that's really exciting too, and kind of understanding from your perspective the trajectory of our media involvement and how that's fueled Latinas as a consumer base, consuming all this technology. Because I feel we consume all this technology, and now there's all these videos and Latinas in tech and groups that I feel have been created through a desire to want to be more present in the media. Am I saying that in a way that makes sense?
No, I agree 100%. I think one of the beauties of struggle and living in a struggle slash survival mode, is that when you move into the thriving mindset, when you take all of these skills that you learned and actually apply them, you then start to make a very powerful statement with not only educating at the fastest rates, not only being the number one business owners in the country right now, or small business creators in the business. We're also now showing up with a $2 trillion buying power, and when you're talking about consumerism. So we're not in this survival mode anymore. Latinos are here. We're 13% of the economy of the U.S., and that's what they've been able to track. That's not including everything that's being made on the back end, cash exchanges that are being done when it comes down to a lot of the migrant workers that are here.
Yeah,
so
I feel we have a cultural economy too. And some of that
Absolutely.
is social capital and digital, and we're going to tag you, so that counts as consumerism. So our fingers are moving, like you said, and it's amazing to see consumerism and the ads kind of catch up with us. But are they? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, there's a lot to be learned from this right now. The ads are not necessarily catching up as quickly as we would expect them to, but there is room for improvement, and there is movement in the right direction. I was sitting with a friend in media last night, and we were discussing kind of the fact that Latinos are actually shifting and becoming the general market, because our entertainment is becoming heard and listened to globally, which allows people then to be seen on the larger scale. When you're talking about content that's bilingual and people of color that are entering a global stage, now you're talking about people all over the world that have the opportunity to truly find cultural identity in the things that they're consuming. So for us to sit here and say that these advertisement dollars are not actually there yet is it's sad that we're there at 2023. However, we need more champions to show up and also do the work that are willing to move this forward, and not just spit DE&I all over the place and expect that to be enough, right? We have to really pound our fists and say, if we are the number one consumers, if we are creating this buying power, then we need to see the ad dollars match that percentage. If it's 13% of the GDP of the U.S., then 13% of your advertisement dollars should be going to this consumer bucket of people that are actually going to consume your products. It shouldn't be a 4% DE&I across the board,
right?
With LGBTQ plus, African American, AA and IP, and Latinos all lumped into one diversity and inclusion bucket for each company. So it's our responsibility just as much as it is their companies too, for us to know, once you know the information and you're aware of it, if you're not utilizing it and actually moving the needle forward, then you're almost doing us a disservice as well.
Right. Hey, Rita, I want to ask you a question. Tell me, when you first came into the media, as far as the Latino audience, and also tell me the growth. Like I know you said it's not enough. The advertisement is still low, but the growth from when you first started to now.
Oh yeah, when I first started, Spotify, Apple, and any other directory out there, they weren't worried about amplifying diverse voices.
Right.
And I'll be honest, there was the inflection point, which was probably George Floyd's incident that happened that kind of exploded everyone. I think we were all in this state of enough is enough. We're kind of tired of it was like the beginning of the end for people not being able to express themselves, to be culturally aware, to know about things that have been happening on the back end, to talk about injustices that happen to people of color. But also on the bigger scale, it almost created this massive awareness of, you guys, where else are we lacking? Like, where else are we not being represented? Where else are we not seeing this movement for us? And I think that it was extremely unfortunate for that to be the catalyst for change. However, after that, then you start to see all of these people looking into, oh my God, all of these people of color, and they're culturally connected, and they want to see themselves reflected, and they don't want to get murdered. And who would have thought, right? But and as common sense as that might sound, we have to understand media has been run by white cis males for the existence of media.
And wait, may I also add religious white cis males who are coming with, and that's a beautiful thing, Rita, but if historically, right, when you look at who is setting the social mores and setting the like guidelines for cultural expression, we're talking about people who are being informed by a very, traditional, in their mind, Puritan perspective of what expression truly is, and quote, who's entitled to it and when,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think and I can agree with that. I mean, I believe that now, again, right, going back to where's our responsibility in this now, right? Now that we know that people are figuring out that it's important, not just, and let's be clear here, right? Like, cultural identity and diversity isn't always about they care that we're out and living our lives out loud. It's more of like what our economic impact is on that space. So if we connect via culture to sell products to us, then they want to connect to us authentically through the cultural aspect. It's not because it's not always because they want you to be out here showing your culture, right?
Yeah,
because
I think
this country was based off of not necessarily enhancing or glorifying the minority, but
or the
which is the
economy
new
that was
majority,
present, because there
honest.
was a diverse economy, and archaeology and other scholars will show you that when you look at some of the indigenous communities as far down to the Incas to up to the Senecas, they were trading, right? So I think when you think about the American economy and like when did it start and all this different stuff, like it really depends on what lens you're bringing. And that's what I think is so exciting, Rita, because when I looked at your LinkedIn, and I think like I shared this when I was talking in anticipation for this interview, like when I looked at looked at your LinkedIn, I was like, wow, this is someone who I would see, or who I do see as a role model, bringing the information and perspective to the parts of business, to the conversations in the way that makes sense, that's going to move the room, right? And that might not always be the way that I want to communicate, or it's important to my peers or, the students here, but advocacy and voices are needed, I think, at every single level. And as a policymaker, when I decided to get on the microphone, I thought about my grandma who marched with Martin Luther King, and like our sometimes inability to like move ourselves, but our ability to like connect, I think, is really this powerful economic tool. And I think that's what you're saying. And I'm so grateful for you and for others who are looking at the big universe of the way that it affects business. So obviously I have to ask you, because I wouldn't be good if this wasn't an interview about coming trends. So Rita, tell us like what, from your perspective, sorry, and I'm so excited, I'm like hitting my microphone. From your perspective, like what is coming, or if there's certain platforms, or you're like, oh, these are certain companies, because I was going to tell you this little secret, like depending on who you are, if you're a company, I will go to your search bar and I will just put in Latina. And if nothing comes up, then I know, okay, it lowers the chance I'm going to buy something from you. It depends on what product I'm looking for, but that one search bar, even if it's a general search bar, and I don't even care what it brings up, if it brings up some content, it makes me more inclined to buy. But that's just like my limited perspective. Are there other ways, or like you said, sources where we can gauge like how the market is trending in terms of the Latino consumerism?
Oh yeah, I mean, and I always joke about this, but I'm like, thank you, Bad Bunny, for like exploding the world, because he legitimately, his content, you know, and it's not just him, it's, you know, it's our entertainment, and we're going to see a lot of bilingual content. Spanish content is key moving forward. The nostalgia that Spanish content creates for people in my generation, and then I'm guessing you're just a touch younger than that.
I'm 33.
No,
okay, good. Right.
The young generation too, because I DJ, and when I go out in the parks, everybody wants to hear Bad Bunny. Matter of fact, some of the older people go, "No, that they can't listen to that because he has content that we don't want our children to listen to." But everybody listen to Bad Bunny.
Right. Yeah. So, but that's the thing, right?
And that's
Bad
Willie.
Bunny,
Thank you, Willie. Go ahead.
Yeah. Most of his content's in Spanish, and it is globally being accepted that Spanish is almost the new English. So I think for me, what I'm seeing in podcasting and what I'm seeing in media in general is that Spanish content is going to be extreme key for us to move forward into this global marketplace, to continue to move into that trend of Latinos being the new general market in general. So we're going to be seeing a lot of applications that are going to be created that will focus on the bilingual and also the Spanish language content in general. So in podcasting in particular, there has been a lack, or like ChatGPT is really great. And I know there's people out there who demonize ChatGPT, but the amount of task hours that a lot of people are saving because they're utilizing this, and they can switch their perspectives on their business to utilize it for other, you know, their resource hours they can use for other things. But ChatGPT is still lacking in the Spanglish, in the Spanglish space, and translations altogether. So understanding dialect. And I do believe that there's going to be a lot of evolution in translation of dialect, which I think will in turn also help ad and media agencies work on how they authentically connect to the user. So I believe there's going to be a lot more authenticity when it comes down to advertisement that's being delivered to you. Don't be surprised if one day you're actually looking at advertisements that look like you consistently and sounds more like you. Right now, they're kind of getting their feet wet. I am not the hugest fan of, like, every time I turn on the TV now, if I'm watching regular television, there's like all ads in Spanish, and I'm like, you're getting there. I understand where you're getting. And now that I look at it I actually look at it as a benefit, and I think it's actually really a positive move in the direction of we're not just Coronas and piñatas anymore, right? Like, we are legitimately a consumer who our dollars are serious, you know, like with our listenership on our podcast network, we over-index in people who make 50 to 75,000, and then over-index on the 125,000 and 150,000 marks. So what that's saying is, you know, we're moving into these spaces where
and y'all are smart.
Legitimately have.
Yeah, you're talking about some good stuff, because those type of people in the Latino community, we have limited time. So if we're investing in listening to these podcasts, it's because they're gaining something, I feel like.
Absolutely. And it's also, you're talking about an educated listener, right? And these educated listeners don't necessarily just want to receive content that's not catered to them. So if you're missing the mark every time you're putting an advertisement in the podcast and it's not being read by the host of somebody that they believe is a loyal listener, you know, a host who has loyal listeners, then you're going to miss the mark every time, right? But when we work with particular campaigns, we make sure that the host read is what we focus on, so that the podcast listener is receiving the same content that they're expecting to receive, and not necessarily just getting an ad that's been put in by insert X person's voice now. Yeah. Voiceovers, I think voiceovers,
it confuses
unless
people.
They are culturally specific, they're going to be,
because their mouths are moving at a different pace than what you're taking in audio. For me, who's neurologically divergent, I always thought it was surreal. I was like, this is like the closest thing to like surrealism that I'll ever like personally experience. But one of the things that I wanted to say, Rita, like again, for like my my academic, because I'm such a dork, and again, we're here at a university, and I have like this political science background, right? Like, Willie, I think
Talia, you're not a dork.
I am, and that's okay.
Ain't nobody thinking
I
you
like
a
to
dork,
read.
girl.
I'm okay with that. But Rita, what I was gonna say,
I'm like, listen, I am a reader. I'm a nerd. I love
it.
It's the most beautiful thing.
Yes, I'm reclaiming this word.
There's nothing wrong with being a nerd. Yeah,
you're right. And
no,
what I
it's
think,
the cool thing now.
What I think is so exciting is like being able to retell American history through the Latino lens, but having that highlight the intersectionality with so many different communities. Like the retelling of the history of the West with the lens of like Black American, Indigenous Americans, and Latinos. Like when you have Latino media, like we're bringing other people with us who are in our network circle or in our talent pool who are from these communities. So it's like almost this entire chorus of perspectives. And I think that has been, for me as an academic, truly something of great value when I'm interacting specifically with Latino content that's made about an area that I have an area of interest in, either from a historical perspective or cultural. Like I'm absorbing things. I think that's a really exciting element to kind of like this rebonding we're having with American history through media right now.
I agree. I am happy for the move. I wish we would have from the beginning done that. You know, Latinos have been here since the existence of this continent.
Oh, you already know.
You know, when we talk about the indigenous connection or the natives that were here, I mean, Mexicans, a good percentage of Mexican people are indigenous who have been in Texas, Arizona, and all these places, California, before it was even the United States. So the thing about that is it's not necessarily, it's great. It really is. And I'm very positive about the movement that we're doing moving forward and how that is going to be reflected. But let's be very careful with the way that we talk about this emerging market, because people have been here since the existence. You know, like when we talk about African-American media, I mean, if we're talking about African-American media, they've been here for more than 200-300 years. Like,
yeah, I lived down the street where Frederick Douglass had his newspaper print. Rita. And
Right.
when I learned that, I was like, let's go. Just because our region here, even in Western New York, like we have a really strong, and I'm so proud of them, we have a really strong network of African-American papers and Latino papers. And like, I feel like that's unique to our state. But like you said, in different areas, that was the paper before the United States was here, was one in the Spanish language.
Right. But Rita, I think Rita, I think when you're talking about the people being here even before the white settlers came here. Is that what you?
Yeah.
That's what I thought you was referring to.
So
okay.
It's funny. We did 23andMe. My father did 23andMe recently, and 33% of my personal culture in my lineage has been in Honduras for 5,000 years.
That's cool.
This is before colonization. This is before all of these things.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of people now that I know specifically that are choosing to do these like DNA reports. And when they're finding out that they're actually not just from this space, they've been here for hundreds of thousands of years, or thousands of years, you know, it puts it into a different perspective. You know, it's like, well, we don't need to feel like we are these like, pobrecitos, or like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Or guests.
Let's amplify.
Okay,
it's like, no, you don't. No, we've been here since the existence. Let's get this correct. Right. Like, all we're doing is creating a resurgence to get back into our positions of power.
Right.
And that is the most important thing for us to continue to prepare. Like, that should be the conversation that we're having, how we are moving back into the positions of power where we were in the past. And it's not necessarily of like, take someone down. It's, we all deserve a seat at the table. Even if our tables are unique and different, then those tables should be the tables that we're creating that elevate our voices again back to where they belong, so that everyone creates an equal space for all of us to have these conversations. And we all have the ability to connect to whatever it is that we want to, you know, like I don't always consume 100% of Latino content every single day, all day, because the other part is we all assimilated, right? So in assimilation now, I have to reprogram my brain to understand that the Latino content is good.
Right. The same thing.
This whole time, over the last X amount of years, we've been told our content wasn't good, right? It wasn't worth it. There was no value in cultural content. And now, like I said, going back to consumerism, once they see the dollars and they're like, oh, okay, we need to amplify. We need to grow this. We need to be part of this. And we have to be very, very careful with the way that what words we choose when we're talking about Black and brown media, specifically Latino and African American, AAIP, LGBTQ plus. Everyone's been here. All we're doing is lifting ourselves back up to these positions so that we now celebrate these spaces.
Now, Rita, Latino influence is huge, and I got to tell you why. I see it. Well, I've been seeing it because I grew up in the Bronx, Puerto Rican, so I always had that Latino influence. But I can see it big because business conference now, the business audience is Latino. The voices, you may have interpreters, Latino churches. When I go to churches now, you have Latino speakers and regular English speaking churches, but Latino. When I go to businesses, because of the bilingual, you see a lot of influence. The management is Latino. So Latino influence is growing and is huge.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really important is, and Rita, you alluded to this, there's a lot of different intersectionality in the Latino community. Like, shout out to my cousin who went to FIT. She's Honduranian and Puerto Rican. Like, being Latina and Latino, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, get it, Steph. That word and that experience means different things to different people, and sometimes people feel othered by that word. And just like you said, creating opportunity, I think, to lift up the conversation is really important. But I think when I was talking about like emerging markets, I meant like in terms of people having access to personal technology that's commodifiable, because historically that wasn't the case. Like historically, when you look at the media market, there might be one newspaper per town. It wasn't everybody in town was buying a newspaper. And now everybody in town has 15 different newspapers, and they're spending $15.99 or $5.99 every single time they're clicking that button. So I think diversifying our media landscape has been transformative also, and I think it's informed the way technology's developed. Because I think about, like, I had the first iPhone and the first Apple iPad. What was it called when it was just music? And it was like just the little box. It was just music. I had that. iPod. Yes, iPod. I had the first iPod. I was getting it. I remember Papi gave it me for Christmas. It was the only thing I got, Rita. And I was like, this is worth it. It was pink. I was like, I am on the cutting edge. And I remember coming to the West Side and like none of my cousins knew what it was. You know what I mean? So like this thing of me being biracial and like standing in between communities that even as a child, I realized had different access to technology as it was developing. But now I would say like technology companies are factoring in the urban market in a different way. And I think that that's exciting. So I'm so excited to be able to follow you and to be able to just see kind of like where you lay your interest. I watch like the people that you like on LinkedIn and the people that influence you, because I think that having a really universal and global perspective on this consumer informed market lens for Latinos includes like a lot of different levels of analysis. And like I got the historical. Someone can call me for that. Like that part I have, because like even thinking about in the cigar factories in the Caribbean, like there were female organizers who were hired to read the newspaper to workers, you know, like that was a whole occupation. That occupation obviously is transformed. And I remember just like being in different spaces and seeing young women just talking to the camera. They set up the camera. They were on the camera. And I was like, oh my gosh, Rita, they're the camera person. They're the producer. They're the news anchor. And now it's like so many people I feel like are part of this like revolution. It's so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, we're revolutionizing media, but all we're doing is really, like I said, getting back to the place where we all deserve to be. There shouldn't be just one person reading, you know, there should
the
be
newspaper, right?
There should be multiple podcasts. I'm in the space of, I believe in collaboration, not competition. So there's no need for us to compete against each other if we're all trying to do the same thing. You know, nobody asked why there are multiple, like there's Peacock and Comcast and YouTube and all this stuff.
And ESPN, like 5.
One, right. But then there's like one Canela, right. And then there's like one Canela Media, who's Canela TV, which shout out to Canela, who's doing an amazing job right now, putting out Spanish language content. They're diversifying and creating stuff for kids now too. And it's like, there shouldn't just be one though. Right? There should have been a long time ago, multiple. We had Univision, we had Telemundo, Televisa, and then that's it. And it's like, That doesn't make any sense. Why is there only one, but there's 400 YouTube TVs, there's, Hulu, Zulu, whatever the case may be. And we buy into that, and it's like, we understand that content's important. However, right, we have to be open to also seeing that there should be more than just one or two like networks and things like that. I mean, I'm excited to see more players coming into the market because it just solidifies this was the right move. It makes so much sense that there should be more players on the field because we need more fields.
Yeah. And we'll make them ourselves. I think that's the other thing too, is like you'll see platforms or channels or like you, and I have a question for you because I think that I always talk to people about their impact, right? And I feel as every time one Latina is empowered to have a stronger sense of media efficacy, of the idea that she or that person can impact media, whether it be from a direct presence or a technological presence or just informing what another Latina is saying, you have a greater sense of efficacy that grows in the entire family. And when you think about the thousands of people, Rita, that have been on your platform, how does that make you feel in terms of understanding your own impact of the voices that you've amplified? Can you give me like a guess number of the amount of different pitches you've heard? Like, no, I want my show to be like this, or like times when you've needed to give people advice, or like kind of the thousands of, how do you explain that? Because I think of it easily as 10,000s of people when I was scrolling and I was seeing all of the faces of the people that you've put on your Instagram and lifted up.
Yeah, so currently we have 32 podcasts on the network. However, when you think about their audience size, we have a lifetime download of over 15 million at this point.
Nice.
So, and then we're building out partnerships and opportunities that are coming on to lift the total number of impact that we can have. When it comes down to pitches that I've heard of podcasts, I mean, I've heard, you'd be surprised. And like any time now, it still surprises me sometimes too, where people can identify me when I'm out. And then they're like, oh, I have this idea for a podcast and I'd love to do it. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome.
You're like, but I'm in the gym right now.
Right, I'm like, this is fine. Give me a minute. But one of the things that I tell people too is like, how is it going to impact? Are you okay with your podcast starting off with like low numbers and then moving in? And you have to do this over time because it takes a while for the audience to build up to be this like very strong audience. And, it's patience. It's also making sure to put out really great content. It's, who are you going to have producing? Are you going to be the producer?
Yeah.
Are you going to be the host and the marketer and the producer, which a lot of indie podcasts do, right?
Yeah.
That is a lot of work and it's very time consuming. For a podcast, it's like 15 to 30 minutes. It can take up to 5 to 10 hours a week to produce, market, upload, edit, schedule your guests.
Right. Gloria Dios. Thank you, Rita. Because I'll be like, where does my time go?
Right. And it's the researching on the people. If you're going to have a interview style podcast, researching the people that you're going to have. So you have very informed questions that are being directed towards that person. So you're not wasting their time or yours, and I think these things people don't take into consideration and they think it's just a very easy, I'm just going to create a podcast and I'm going to move forward and that's it. Boom, the end. And it's like, and you have to be consistent, because I like to watch my television shows every, Monday at 7 p.m. I know I'm watching trash TV. And like, if it's not on at 7 p.m. every Monday, then I'm going to be upset with Bravo. Right. So it's like that you should take that much. It should be that serious for you because once you create a podcast, it's no longer about you. It's about your audience.
Yeah.
And you do them a disservice every time you don't show up.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest thing for people that I constantly communicate over and over again. Are you ready to be consistent? Are you ready to even get on a microphone? Have you ever even heard your voice on a microphone before?
Yeah.
Do you like the sound of your voice? Would you listen to the content that you're putting out there? And if not any of those answer no, then stop where you're ahead. Don't invest the money. Don't do it. But, I don't try to discourage people because I truly believe in the First Amendment and I believe in freedom of speech, and the ability for us to create content is extremely important because we need it.
Yeah. And I think
however,
go ahead.
If you're not going to be consistent, if you're not going to commit to putting this out there. And if you're not going to take the audience into consideration, there's probably other things that you could be doing. Go Instagram Lives, go YouTube Shorts, go, something else where you can get your conversation out there that's less time consuming and not needed. There's not that level of production that you need to put into place.
Yeah, I was just going to reflect on what you were saying, because in terms of, for me, when I found an academic article, and I think it was from the Columbia Journal about community media, for me as an academic, it did a lot for me because it helped me kind of understand like my place, perspective, and purpose in the media landscape. Because I was like, okay, I know that the perspective I'm bringing is different than someone who does this professionally, right? And then I started to realize that there was this area of like training expertise and academic credential that did inform professional journalism, and that they were also, but like what's weird about Instagram is like someone who went to Columbia School of Journalism and me can be on the same platform, like we're on the same page. So I think like there's this weird thing that happened to me coming in, trying to like kind of find my space of trying to do research and really understand, like when I told people like I was going to have a podcast or I was going to like enter into media, they're like, oh, it's going to be a podcast. But Rita, like you said, they call everything a podcast, but there are different interactive elements of social media that maybe feel like they have the semblance of a podcast, but there is a really technical term. And there is somebody locally who I worked with from Someone Six Live who always says, this is not a hobby. And I'm like, sometimes I just, I love him, but he was one of the people, actually a lot of people from the African-American community were allies for me. Like when I was like kind of having this area of like exploration of like, okay, I'm an advocate and I now want to translate that to media advocacy. Like, how do I do that? Right. And I think for me, part of what has been liberating is that realizing, like you said, there's a place for everybody, because I have like a Swell, which is like a micro podcast, and it's like new, it's 3 to 5 minutes. Right. And for me, that feels meaningful because of my span, because I started, online learning, 10 years ago with my master's program, because of who I am. 3 to 5 minutes feels informative. But for other people, that's like half of a commercial. So I love like hearing your perspective about podcasts, because I think that's like the most serious product like that you can prepare. Like once you're on a podcast and you're preparing it professionally, like that's really like a consumer item, where a lot of other people are kind of like touching the media and community broadcast space, and they feel like it's a podcast, but it's not really, I don't think, in the way that the consumer and professional and business market is informed. Does that make sense? Because like I feel like these all areas of gray, and I don't feel like people know really what to call those.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the media, like where you're delivering, with podcasts in particular, if there's an RSS feed and you're delivering it through a hosting platform, it's still a podcast, right? Like, and it really just depends on how you're delivering it. YouTube also has podcasts now because they realize that Latinos, we changed the market there, right?
Let's go.
That Latinos consume their podcasts on YouTube. So why not create an entire RSS feed for that particular style of content, so that they could differentiate between a YouTube video and a podcast episode. And so it really just depends. I mean, because your podcast isn't structured the way that everybody else is, it doesn't matter. I mean, wherever you're uploading, that's really what determines the podcast. Is the audio tied to an RSS feed? Then yes, it is considered a podcast. If it's not, which it wasn't before, right, through YouTube, then it wasn't considered a podcast. But now there is that opportunity for you to subscribe, and there's a feed as well, so you can embed it anywhere that you'd like. I don't want people to get too caught up in the semantics specifically, because I'm pretty sure that anybody who's listening to this is probably going to start something independently. But, structure your podcast out. Make sure that you're putting it in a nice format that would make it easy for the listener to flow with you. And make sure that your interview questions, if you are doing an interview style podcast, are, they deep dive into the topic and listen. Listening is the number one thing. People always feel, especially as hosts, that they want to overspeak and they're not letting their guests talk. And so they might be missing out on important content that would make their podcast more enjoyable,
Right.
More interesting, and have the opportunity to grow the audience size better if you allow for the content that is needed to be delivered. So slow down, give the person who is speaking a chance to get their point across. And then, making sure that your podcast is actually tied to an RSS feed. You can also do it through a website as well. I think Square, or I can't remember what website itself allows for you to also embed your audio into there, so you have an RSS feed and it's able to be shared. So let's not get caught up in the semantics of all of it, but just make sure that you are putting out great content that is listenable and that is shareable and that allows people to connect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your perspective and for you giving that feedback. And I think that a lot of the message that I'm absorbing is, things really should be personalized to the audience that you're connecting to in a way that is meaningful to them. And that's why I appreciate you also. So just for everyone that's listening, we're live on the radio at 91.3. And I think that student-supported radio and schools of journalism and student journalism is such a really important part of the ecosystem that we're talking about. And also, I think CUNY and SUNY recognize this, a huge opportunity for advertisers. But we're here, we're also on Instagram, and then we're also on StreamYard. So we're streaming in 3 different places for me. And because of when I came into the media expression space, that feels normal for me. I think it's so interesting for us to just coexist and continue, like you saying, to build platforms where we can highlight each other's voice. Because I think I learned a lot about my own ability to self-express by watching, Latinas in the West Coast who I felt were a lot more connected to their own self-expression or their right to self-express, and or, just the historical perspective of how that informed their identity and how they were showing up. So I remember, and I did interview Latinas Uprising. There definitely, I think, are some, I always think, teased OGs in the game of identity specific content specific for Latinas, right? Whether it be on Instagram or other platforms, and people who have supported these platforms for years. And occupationally now, when I'm advising students at university, I tell them, follow Latina content that is of the, occupation that you're pursuing. So for me, as someone who is part of the legal community, and there obviously being less of us in the legal community than in other spaces, right? Being able to be connected on Instagram with other Latinas who are lawyers was transformative in my identity, right? Occupationally. So I also think about that. So just as we're closing our space, and very grateful for all of your perspective and advice that you're bringing. If you're talking to a Latina who's crafting their professional self-expression, whether it be through active media branding or just through self-expression through social media and LinkedIn and stuff, what advice would you give them relative to how much to share or what to share, or how to show up? Because I think there's a lot of space that we're still navigating even internally in our community like that.
Hey, Talia, before you start, Rita, we also are streaming live on 91.3 FM WBNY Facebook.
On the Facebook too. So we're on Facebook, StreamYard, Instagram, on the radio, the Real Radio FM. We're 5 different places, but that's the beauty of public and community media, right? Because you just never know what person's going to listen to this that's going to be impacted. Because I think identity affirming media is important in the Polish language, in Arabic, and in Korean. I feel everything that our community should have, all communities should have too, because it drives innovation in my mind.
Exactly. No, I agree 100%. I mean, and innovation only happens when people show up authentically and show what they see in their minds as what should be translated out into the world, right? And so going back to your question, how do I believe that Latinas should show up and how much they should share? I think whatever your intuition is calling you to do, be authentically you, because right now is the perfect time to be able to prove that we're not monolithic. And if we continue to fit into this cookie cutter mold of what Latina is, then people aren't going to know that we have nerds and goths and emo and people who love 1950s clothing, and we all identify as Latinas because it's the cultural thing, right? Not everybody eats meat. I mean, I'm a pescatarian, right? So it's we have, and I like to ground and walk in the grass and hug trees. That's who I am. I love yoga. You know, I'm a spiritual connected person. And that's how I show up authentically for myself. And it kind of bleeds into everything that I do now. It's part of who I am. But if I don't show up authentically, then other people don't have the opportunity to do that either. So for me, what I would say is show up and share what you feel most comfortable sharing. And if you're on that teeter that something feels a little uncomfortable, question why it feels uncomfortable. If you are feeling uncomfortable because what your status quo was telling you not to show up culturally like yourself, then push your own boundary and show up with that as well. Because what that's going to do is continue to show people we are here and our culture is no longer something that we're going to hide. It is something that we're going to celebrate.
Wonderful. Hey, Rita, what's the deal? I've been hearing this a lot. Tree hugging. What's that all about? Tell me, what is that about? Maybe I should get into it. What's the tree hugging thing about?
Well, trees have a very strong network. They're just like people. They connect underground.
Oh,
we
right.
Just
That's
don't
true.
see their roots, right?
That's true. Right.
And if you think about the soil, I mean, we bury people underground for health reasons, but we also bury them because they eventually leave and become back. They go back into the dirt that they started from, right? Mm-hmm. From the nothingness we come to the nothingness we end. And so what I believe personally is that our ancestors are tied into the soil and to the roots of the trees. So if you ever actually go and touch a tree and you sit there for a few minutes, you're going to feel the vibrations of the tree. So the trees. Now this is going into this is going to be very, very woo-woo, right? But
it's okay. SUNY has a forestry school. We're with you, Rita.
Right.
We do. We have a school of forestry.
Right. Yeah. Look, and all elements are tied to the trees. The wind helps the trees grow their branches and their leaves.
Right.
The water is stored within the roots. So it just helps reconnect to who we are naturally as humans and what our natural instincts were from the beginning. And putting your feet in the ground, it's like when people are like, when you're floating in the sky, you got to kind of ground down and come back to earth, come back to reality. And that's what it helps me. Like yesterday, I was having this massive, I wouldn't even call it an anxiety thing, but I was just there was a lot being thrown at me at once. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to get outside, get some sunshine, vitamin C and vitamin D, and then go hug the tree because the tree has more knowledge than I do. The tree's been around for thousands of years.
And reflection is so core, I think, to growth. And I think reflection is really important in certain indigenous communities too, that you set that time out. That I think is seen.
Exactly.
I feel like if you're a leader in certain communities and you don't take that time to deliberately reflect, and a lot of times I feel like with indigenous communities, it's in nature. They think it's a sign, I feel like, that the balance isn't there.
Yeah.
But what I was going to ask Rita, and I know Willie, you had a closing thought too, was Rita, I know that you're part of a network of powerful women, right? That are very present and looking for media and looking for, social content in different places, both academic and organic. Are there different organizations or publications or things that you would places that you want to lift up while we're together that you would say that you'd want me or other people or Willie or myself to see or to know about, that kind of for you either do a good job or represent? Because I think about Nike just has someone that I think has launched a podcast that was about Latinas. I saw Diddy had just put out he's curating a community. So I feel like there's a lot of different kinds of content, and some of them are coming from the places that we know, but we don't know for this content. So it's what's trusted sources or sources that you think really, do you know what I mean? Are places or things that you want people to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ana Flores with We All Grow is doing an amazing job with curating. She started off with Mommy Bloggers. Mommy Bloggers Connect, I think it was called, and then turned it into this massive mega platform of Latinas, and now has a conference that they host every year that connects Latinas, and they are growing this massive conference. I'm actually this weekend attending the Spoiled Latina Summit here that was created by Yvonne Guidry, just connecting to herself and being her true authentic self. And now this
that sounds so fun.
Growing and bringing a bunch of Latinas together, specifically in the South. The Luz Collective is also really great. Nuestros Stories is a growing platform right now. They are sharing content, and they're going to be producing content as well for Latinos that'll kick up that nostalgic feeling. Avenida Productions is going to be launching a streamer really soon with content that is both Spanish, English, and Spanglish, and people who look and sound like me and you. So basically, your Netflix for Latinos.
Get it. Let's go.
You know, these are all trusted sources that I believe truly are doing and embodying, you know, media and its sound. And of course, Latina Podcasters Network and Latino Pods, all of our podcasts on both networks deliver exactly what you're looking for. And you can actually download our app, Latina Podcasters Network, on iOS and
Stop playing
Apple.
with Rita. She's got her own app. Stop playing with her. Rita, let's go. That's so exciting.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that's the thing is, like, it's not there, so we have to deliver it,
yeah.
right? And I'm
But
not
you're a boss
afraid
for
to
that.
be the person showing up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to know
and
you.
I am finally celebrating that. That's the thing, right? Like, we have to get out of that humble mindset. There's a difference between ego and actually celebrating who you are.
Right.
And I'm stepping into that celebration mode these days where I'm like, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I appreciate the compliment, because you know what? It has taken 4 years to get to this point, and I can't imagine what the next 20 years are going to look like. But because I took a chance on myself and I wanted to create something more powerful for the future. And I believe that most people who are listening, everyone has the ability to do the same thing. There's not just like one millionaire in the world. There are multiple, right? There are multiple, but you can do it too. You just have to put in the effort as to what you actually want to do. And I guarantee you, just stay the course, and the world is going to open itself up to create for you, to help you also grow your platform as well. As long as you're doing something to help other people. And that's the biggest thing, is like, every day that you wake up, ask yourself, how can I help? And I guarantee you, things become a lot more positive, and your life opens up to create really positive and powerful things.
Rita, thank you for that. Like, I'm going to watch back our interview. I feel so grateful to talk with you. I remember, again, just looking at your LinkedIn in awe, like, oh my goodness. And the sense of affirmation I got when you accepted my invitation to come, I think is a testament to your authentic leadership of wanting to meet your, you know, like, community members in different spaces. Because I've seen you on, you know, I Googled you and I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these like mainstream media networks and like you being interviewed and just like you being a big deal, and then meeting me on, you know, student radio. I think you're a great example to all of the students that are listening. And I'm very proud of the fact that, you know, you went to a state school, and here at SUNY, we have a Center for Community Media, where they have a Black media initiative and a Latino media initiative. And they actually have like a map of different Latino newspapers and Black newspapers. And I just feel really lucky to be here at SUNY right now, and then to be having conversations with you, because I feel like so many of the stories that are yet to be told are stories of student leaders and stories of people who, like you, have really stepped into being a media influencer because it's part of advancing our equity and like our right to like economy, which I love. And like, I'm just so grateful. So I'm going to make sure that everybody who's listening in all spaces knows where to follow you on Instagram, can listen to all the podcasts. I'm really excited to listen to our interview again, and just to continue to be influenced by you. You know, I feel really grateful. As we close this space, was there like one woman in your life that like influenced you, or like one like person where when you were looking at media? Because like Oprah was I'm like stepping back into like me admitting that Oprah influenced me deeply, but that's a big fact, because every day after school at 4:30 I was in front of that TV learning words, and I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. No, there's two people. Obviously Oprah, right? Because she was a woman of color, period. And the way that she got into media is not traditional.
Yeah,
and for me, I'm not your traditional media person. But overall, honestly, I think my biggest role model has been my mother.
Yeah.
We had a massive rocky relationship my whole life growing up. But one of the beautiful things that I'm noticing now is that the reason for that was because she was instilling in me a very strong power that all women have that we normally don't lean into. And that's the ability to create and we create life, we create ideas, we create space. You know, we create comfortable homes to live in. We create beauty. This is our nature. It's part of who we are. And once we step into this strong feminine power, there's nothing that we can't do, right? And I think that can be kind of scary too, because when you notice that, it's like, oh my God, this is a lot, right?
Well, Rita, you have created the desire for me to hug a tree. I just hope I don't get
Willie is from, Willie, are you not from Brooklyn?
I am
not
from Brooklyn.
They asked me to read someone out of state asked me to send me a picture of outside. They're like, send us a picture of you outside, because it was for like a conference thing, and I couldn't find any pictures of me outside except playing baseball or protesting. I was like, those are the two things that I do outside. I'm just so New York, you know what I mean? I'm like wearing heels. Like, this counts because I'm outside, but I'm wearing stilettos, wearing like a patent leather jacket. That's like my outside photo. Willie, do you want to close the space for us? Did you have any final thoughts? For Rita?
No,
Thank
Rita,
you so much for joining us.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, of course.
So this is a state school radio station. I'm very proud of everyone who's listening. I'm proud of you, Talia, for showing up and doing this. Is extremely important. And just one thing I want to say, because I am a person who went to a state school, who cares? The institution is not what makes you. You make you. And you're the one who's going to stand on that degree, and that degree is not going to define you. So don't let anybody tell you that graduating from a state school doesn't create multimillionaires, because it does every single day. And if that's not your place, but all you're doing is connecting to your passion and creating something profound, or even just going to work for somebody, that's beautiful too. And so just wanted to empower people out there who are listening, because the institution doesn't define you. It's what you do with it.
Yeah, no, I'm proud of my state's commitment to advancing equity in media. That's the only reason why I mentioned it, because we really attract people from all over the country. Because I think that, university, we have that responsibility, and you're just really showing up really like amazingly for the schools that because honestly, because I feel like when you represent like your schools, like it's so exciting. And I think a couple other people who have been part of the same community, and just really strong characters. And I'm just so grateful for you, for giving me the chance to interview you, and for joining us on 91.3 FM. I'm literally looking at the sign on the wall because I always get the letters mixed up. It's 91.3 FM, WBNY. And Rita, I'm definitely so grateful for you, because I'm going to continue to follow you and be influenced by you. And I'm definitely going to encourage everybody else in the listening audience, including Willie, after he's done hugging his tree, which I don't believe he's going to do, to follow you on Instagram, Rita.
I'm actually good.
If you post it, it only counts if you post it.
Hey, Rita, I'm actually going to do it. My problem is I'm scared I might get freaky with it. I just want to share one more thing. I was DJing in the park the other day, and a police officer came up to me. I thought he was going to tell me to turn it off, or where's your permit? But he was looking at me, and I looked, and I saw the way he was looking, and I said, "Are you a DJ?" He said, yeah. He got on. He was a Latin police officer, and he was cutting his
He's a real person. I've known him my whole life, yeah.
Oh, you know him?
Oh, yeah, of course I know him. He's Puerto Rican.
That's the hot police officer that's hit like social media.
The singing one? No, that's another guy.
No.
This was
so fine.
No, this guy was handsome. This guy was handsome also. He was a police officer. He got on, scratching, cutting. I'm like, whoa, everybody got their cameras out, videos, because he was awesome.
We're committed to media and to music over here. And Rita, I only went to Texas once, but if I do come back, it will definitely be me begging you for a brunch. Like a very fashionable brunch and a taco. Like, I'm so excited for you to join us. Hopefully I can make it that way. But like, you're really, your state, I feel like, is trending and leading the nation in a lot of different ways. And I'm just so grateful to be connected with you very seriously, because I know I'm all the way over here by Canada, and I'm saying that into the microphone for everybody who doesn't believe me. So being able to be connected with you and listen to, the ways that media influences you and the trends that you see, I really think elevates the national conversation. And I see Paula La Poleta, she's tuning in from parts of Pennsylvania. So it's just so cool for us to have this national connection in Latino media. And without a doubt, you are definitely a national leader. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you guys.
I'm gonna again share the links with you so we can share this in other spaces. And thank you again for being with us and for appearing so authentically.
Thank you.
Make history
I'll talk to you later.